Hello and welcome to Endurance Minded. It's the podcast that looks at the psychological and emotional components of endurance sports and how they impact performance. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, founder and coach of TEC. And this episode, I want to talk about the value and the importance of prioritizing progress over perfection. It's something that we've talked about before on the show. I've talked about it on some of the solo episodes that I've done. I've talked about it at length with some of our guests that we've had on the show, and the idea that consistency is what matters most, that progress over long periods of time is something that will ultimately yield and produce the results that you want. But that being said, this is so often the thing that I find myself speaking with athletes about is how do we continue to move forward when things aren't going as planned? What do we do when the way that we thought our progress would unfold, when the runway that we laid out, we thought it would look a certain way, and when we actually start to execute and work to nail down that consistency, nail down time for ourselves, it doesn't work out like we thought. And this is something I think we've all experienced, is that life comes at us really fast, and our days are dynamic, and more we are busy, we are distracted, we are having more and more trouble prioritizing ourselves, prioritizing the things that matter most to us, as we take in input from all of these other places, from our work, working to prioritize family, friends, the list goes on. And what this does is it makes it challenging to focus on the big picture. And the big picture is progress, again, not perfection. So I want to dive in today and I want to unpack what it looks like to prioritize and focus on progress, put that first, and to relieve some of that pressure that we put on ourselves. Because what that pressure does when we're aiming for perfection is it actually gets in the way of progress. It reinforces the idea that if it's not perfect, it's not worth doing at all. If that workout doesn't go as planned, if we aren't able to move at the frequency and consistency that we had hoped that we would be able to, that it's not worth pursuing. And that is not the mindset that leads to a healthy lifestyle. It's not the mindset that leads to a productive pathway to us reaching our goals and reaching our full potential. So I want to take a few steps back, and I want to look at how we can structure our lives, how we can think about things in a different way, how we can structure our the mental component of how we think about progress, how we think about reaching our goals, and work to lay out opportunities. If this is a place you find yourself in, lay out opportunities for you to redefine success and to actually move in a direction that feels productive. So, like I said, more and more we are struggling to put ourselves first. We've talked about this again. If you listen to the show, we've talked about this at length on the podcast, and something that it probably doesn't do any good to try to change that component of our lives, right? Things are only moving faster. They're only getting there's more opportunities to be distracted, to be to be in a place where we are not as present as we would like. And we can certainly work to build habits and to build a lifestyle that allows us to be more present, to be more focused, to be more centered in our lives. But the fact remains is we have a lot coming at us. And we are busier and we are always struggling to understand and to work to put ourselves first and to make that time. The thing that I talk about most with athletes, or the things that the thing that athletes come to me to discuss is how do they make time? How do they carve out time to reach their goals? And if we take a step back, where that conversation really starts is what does it look like to be successful, right? Is that 6 days a week of intense focused training, specific workouts that are designed to move you forward, and if that's the case, is that realistic? Is that something that's obtainable? And so I think there's often a juxtaposition between what we think progress looks like and what progress actually looks like in our own lives day to day as we manage all of these inputs that we're all trying to deal with. So I want to outline again several different ways that I think we can restructure and work to think about this progress over perfection mindset, where our primary goal is that we set ourselves up to make incremental progress, incremental changes to how we move forward, how we actually go about pursuing our goals, and how we actually think about those goals, how we think about defining success, how we think about whether or not we have made progress or not. Are we satisfied with that progress? Is it fulfilling? Does the pursuit of that progress, that incremental, those incremental gains day after day, does it help us feel more centered, more balanced, more present in other areas of our lives? I think when we find the balance that's right for us, that is what I believe the outcome should be, is that we are able to see that show up in other places in our lives. So it's not just that we go and we squeeze a workout in and we execute that workout. It's that we're able to understand and reap the benefits of that structured time, of that time for ourselves, of that time and our ability to connect with our body and to check in, and that we see how that presence of mind, how that structure, how that valuing of our own goals and our own time allows us to show up completely and fully in other areas of our lives. I've talked about those concepts at length in other episodes. If you haven't listened to them, the one that we actually did 2 weeks ago was about being present and how to structure that time so that you can arrive and use exercise as a way to arrive at a place of more presence and more fulfillment. So check out that episode if you haven't had a chance to catch up on that. And so the first place that I think it is meaningful and impactful to, again, shift our focus towards a progress-centric mindset versus a perfection-centered mindset is that I think it really starts with how we structure our time. More specifically, I believe it starts with working to build habits. So what a habit is really a way to structure our time. It's a way to structure how we move through the day. So whether it is, very small things like making your bed in the morning when you get up, obviously things like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, making coffee, eating breakfast. There's so many habitual things that we do throughout the day, but when we do them, typically they are at similar times or the same time, and that allows for very specific structure or creates very specific structure in our day. And I think that structure, it makes it easier to prioritize your time. So think about if you have less of that structure, or if you struggle to create and maintain habits, think about what that time feels like. I know in the conversations that I have with athletes, in times when I feel like I personally am removed from those habits, it feels like I'm constantly being reactive, right? So the antithesis of that is to be proactive, right? We are proactive about how we set up our day, how we think about our time, how we think about being successful in that time, producing the results that we want in a given day. And part of that is movement. Part of that is exercise. Part of that is prioritizing ourselves. But if we are in a reactive place, because that time is unstructured, we are taking in inputs and we're reacting on the fly, right? It's very much out of our control, right? We get an email, we get a phone call, we respond to a relationship that we have. We're constantly, when you're in that place, you're bouncing around from thing to thing, putting out fires, and it gets harder and harder to prioritize your time. You can imagine the scenario where when we're in that reactive state, what happens is that the result of that, as it relates to our goals as athletes and wanting to maintain consistent exercise, is that we start to put ourselves last, right? That reactivity creates barriers between our ability to prioritize ourselves and carve out that time. And I see so many people operating in that state. Is we wake up and immediately we're reactive, right? You check your phone, you check email, you turn on the TV, right? Whatever that is for you, you're immediately taking in external inputs that are contributing to how you move through your day. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing or that we don't have to do those things, but if we create habits that we stick to and that are in, again, typically those habits are associated with time frames, right? Movement in the morning, stretching, again, normal, things like brushing your teeth and showering. They happen in time frames that structure that day and structure that time. And I think the more that we can create habits, the more that structure allows us to be proactive versus being reactive. The more that we can get away from that reactivity, the better, the better we're going to feel, right? The frantic notion and that frantic movement through the day tends to not be very productive, right? And from a mental perspective, emotionally, it leaves us feeling frazzled. The more we can take back that time, the more we can control that time, the better. Again, specific to our goals as athletes, specific to our need to keep consistent movement as a top priority, both from a physical health perspective, but also from a mental health perspective. The more that we can control that time, the less likely it is going to be that we move ourselves in that time to the bottom of our to-do list, to deprioritize that time. So I encourage you to think about how you can work to build habits. And the end goal may be that one of those habits is movement, right? So it doesn't have to be anything major, but, wake up, short walk in the morning, check in with your body, stretching, whatever it is, those habits are going to help you structure that time. And so just think about if there are moments through the day, time periods where you feel more reactive than proactive, those are great times to think about how you can build habits. And habits can be associated with other time periods. So, okay, I'm going to eat lunch, and every day at lunch I do X, right? Go for a short walk, turn off my phone, take a break from social media, whatever it is, and however that feels most productive for you, that time, again, starts to build on itself, and structure leads to our ability to control that time. And I think we just want to get away from some of those feelings that, again, I know I've dealt with, and I speak with people that are dealing with it. It's just this kind of, you're constantly running to the next thing. You're constantly working to catch up, to put out that next fire, to respond to that next thing. And we just want to pull back a little bit and try to be a little bit more or as proactive as we can be about controlling that time so that we can control our response and we can control how we move through the day. And with that control comes our ability to put ourselves at the forefront. And that's going to be, again, that's going to lead to progress, right? That's going to lead to consistent touch points over long periods of time when it comes to training, when it comes to consistency, when it comes to mindset and how we think about our ability to show up for that workout, right? So often we think that we don't have time because we need to prioritize something else, and that gets in our way. So again, start small. And it doesn't even have to be training related. Those habits support our overall trajectory as athletes and our ability to set ourselves up for success. So the first way we can take a more progress-oriented mindset over perfection-oriented is to work to build habits. Any place we can inject those habits and get away from that reactivity is going to help us, again, move in a direction that's going to be productive for our goals as athletes. The second area that we can take a progress-oriented mindset is that we can work to let go of specifics. So what I mean by that is often when we think about our identity as athletes, when we think about what we want to accomplish, when we set goals, and they could be very specific outcome-oriented goals. They could be, I want to run a marathon. I want to do this bike race. I want to, do an event, a distance, accomplish a thing, climb a mountain. They could also be very finite, very clear process-oriented goals. Things like I want to exercise 5 times a week. I want to exercise so that I can be healthier. Lower my blood pressure, cholesterol, some of these, very real things, but the process becomes something that's important. When we think about what that looks like, we often have very, very specific ideas about the shape that it's going to take, right? Okay, I'm going to reach this goal, or in order to reach this goal, I'm going to exercise 5 days a week. Those exercises are going to consist of, 3 specific types of workouts. We're going to do, a power-based session. We're going to do speed, and we're going to do endurance. Right. So we break it down and we build these constructs in our minds that have a lot of specifics related to them. Right. And I think it's even subconscious sometimes, or we do it unconsciously, where we don't even realize we've already thought about exactly what that's going to look like and feel like to be an athlete as we prepare to reach those goals. We provide ourselves or build these very, very specific constructs, and part of that is good, because I think you need to have a clear vision. You need to understand what it's going to look and feel like, and what is necessary to reach your goals. However, I think we should also work to hold those specifics a little more lightly, because progress may not always look like what we think or thought it would look like, right? So we decide that, okay, I'm going to tackle this goal, or this is what I need to do to be healthy. This is what I need to do to show up for my family, my friends, to be the person I want to be, to feel good, to feel confident in my body, to feel strong. And then we set these constructs again, and we decide this is what it's going to look like. And then we go back, then we wake up and have to go to work in the morning, right? The days are long. We don't sleep as well as we had hoped. We go on vacation. Any number of things come up, and when we get back to the job, the task of moving through life and showing up in all the areas that we need to show up in, it becomes much more challenging oftentimes to execute in a way that's in exact alignment with those specifics. And so I think we can, if we let go of those specifics, it can just help us, again, get away from being perfection oriented. Because what I see happen is when it shifts, I'd say it's not if, but when, and we say, okay, well, I was going to do 5 workouts a week, and they were going to, take on these very specific modalities, and the focus was going to be very specific. When we're not able to show up and execute exactly like we had mapped out, we often lose. It's just easy to lose steam, right? We say, well, if I couldn't get my speed work in, or I couldn't get my endurance work in, then the whole thing is falling apart, right? It's not worth it. I guess if I can't do it this way, it's not worth doing at all. I've seen so many athletes struggle with that over the years is, if this is what it takes to be successful based on the specifics that I've mapped out in my mind and what I think it should look like, if this is what it takes and I can't execute that perfectly, then I guess it's not worth it, right? And that, of course, is not the mindset that we want, right? It is always worth the sum total of the effort, the consistency over time, the showing up is what matters, even if it's not what we had in mind, even if it's not the exact, quote unquote, perfect session. Showing up is always worth it. So we let go of some of the specifics. One, we can let go of specific activities. So like I was saying, what does progress look like on any given day? Maybe in the perfect, again, using quotes, the perfect training plan, a particular day was a day for a hard, high intensity interval session. But that's not going to happen today, right? You wake up, either you're not feeling well, your body's not responding like you thought it would. Again, the stress of life is cumulative, and it's feeling like it's getting the best of you on a particular day. Let go of a specific activity. So even if you don't, even if you're not able to show up, right? Even just at a very basic level, the day got away from you. You're not going to make that workout, right? That happens, right? It happens to me. It happens to everyone. Even if we try to do all these things, it still is going to happen. Okay, let go of that specific activity, right? How can I continue to think about progress over perfection? Progress would be, I'm still going to show up, I'm still going to engage with my body, I'm still going to check in. It's just going to be in a different way than I had planned, than I had originally thought that it would look and feel like. So again, maybe it's a high intensity interval session. Does it move to, or do we set our sights on, something like just stretching before bed, checking in with our body, doing some mobility work, activation, an easy walk, taking the family out for a walk after dinner, whatever it is, still progress, right? We've just redefined what it looks like to move towards our goals, to continue to see progress on that particular day. It doesn't mean that we're not going to strive to show up and execute in a way that's in alignment with our goals tomorrow or the next day, but on that day, we just need to shift. And so I think having a more fluid approach, being able to shift that progress-oriented mindset in real time is a really productive skill to hone, because that fluidity helps you stay focused, helps you stay engaged. And again, consistency is what matters. So if we can just keep that touch point consistent, even if it's not the workout that we thought it was going to be, even if it's not, doesn't necessarily have the physiological benefits, or it doesn't create the adaptive opportunities that the original planned session might have. That's fine. We're still going to show up, and we're going to think about progress versus perfection. Another area is frequency. So letting go of specifics when it comes to how often we train or work out. I'd like to think about it more from a movement perspective. How often do we check in with our body? How often do we engage with some level of physicality? Even if it's not quote unquote training, even if it's not a workout, not that we don't need to do those things. Certainly we need to provide enough training stress, enough opportunities for adaptation with a long enough runway to create levels of fitness that we need to reach our goals and execute on those things. But again, if we look at progress over the long term, we can back off on some of the stress that we put on ourselves to execute day after day. And so, again, when we think about that, what that training is going to look like, I would argue that oftentimes we can overload ourselves. So we think about a world in which it's the best case scenario, right? What's realistic for us in terms of a training schedule? We often think about a magical, mythical world in which we don't have to deal with the stressors of life, that we are perfectly rested every day, and that our nutrition is great, and we're happy and disciplined and motivated. And again, then we get back to our lives, and we understand that days unfold and our lives are dynamic. And that's just not how it works some days. And so that frequency may need to be adjusted, right? The world in which we outlined in our minds when we were setting these goals, where we had 6 days a week where we could stick to a structured training program, maybe it's not realistic, or maybe that's just thinking about things with too much of a perfectionist mindset. Can we back off on the frequency, right? If we're going to do 4 structured workouts a week, do we do 2 or 3? Set yourself up for success, and again, reframe how you think about progress. Would 4 structured workouts be great? But if you're not able to execute on those consistently week after week, then it's not having the effect that you wanted anyway. So back up and adjust the frequency. I think that's another way we can let go of these specifics, is whatever we decided the week was going to look like, the month, the season, if it feels like you're in a place where that's been hard to nail down, and there's a psychological component there too. Week after week, if you feel like you're not executing in alignment with what you laid out, it becomes hard to stay excited about that, because you feel like failure is imminent. So how do we back up and set you up for success? Adjust that frequency, right? You can readjust it down the road. You can add back in more workouts. You can add back in whatever you want, but work on nailing down a frequency that is in alignment with a more progress-focused mindset versus perfection. Another way that we can let go of specifics is timing. And specifically what I mean by that is when in the day do we move? When do we exercise? You hear this stuff all the time about, you got to get up at 3 a.m, you got to exercise, and you got to get it done at these specific times, and that's what it means to be disciplined. And I think there is some value in again, building habits that lead to the outcome that we want and having that discipline. But what time works for you, right? I see athletes so often try to force a time that is not that's not enjoyable for them. It's not realistic. It's not. It doesn't allow them to be consistent. So if you've decided that there's a specific time, again, often this is ahead of time. You say, okay, this is what it looks like. Next 16 weeks, I'm gonna I'm going to build towards this specific goal, and the workouts, I'm going to get up at 5 in the morning, I'm going to do them. And then you go to actually do that, and it's not working well, right? Either it's disrupting your quality of sleep, right? You're not getting enough sleep, so that's not productive, or you don't feel well, or it doesn't work for your schedule, right? Whatever it is. And I'm using morning as an example. It could be any time of the day. Adjust your timing, right? Reframe what it looks like to make progress, and nail down a time that works for you. Let go of those specifics of, I have to be the person who gets my workout in before 6 a.m. Maybe that is you. But if it's not, that's fine. When is that time? And again, that goes back to the habit piece. How do we build structure in our day where that time is ours, where we can come back to that time consistently? I know everyone's busy, and I know that when I talk about building that structure, having those habits, carving out that time, it can seem impossible. But I promise it's doable. I work with a lot of people with really, really busy schedules, and it can happen. We just have to get very clear on what works for you, what is realistic, what is repeatable, what can I do day after day, what's sustainable. So again, letting go of some of those specifics. The 3 areas in particular are specific activities. So coming off of some of those constructs about what specific activities we do. Another area is frequency. How often do we exercise? How often do we move? How often do we do specific workouts? If that frequency is unattainable or not sustainable for you, you can adjust those specifics. And then the timing of those things. So 3 very key areas that we can kind of release or loosen our grip on how we define and think about success. And again, the goal being that we want to think about progress and not having every single detail perfect every single day. Another area that we can be progress oriented is to define progress during specific seasons and in context with the rest of your life. So I'll expand on that. We often think that things look the same or should look the same day after day, year after year, no matter what happens, no matter what comes at us. And I think it's really important and really valuable to take a step back and work to define progress in relation to where you're at in 2 areas. 1, in your life, and 2, in relation to your goals. So progress, as you're building up to run a marathon, is going to look very different than what progress looks like when you're strength training in the off season to build resiliency, injury prevention, and muscular endurance in preparation for the next season. Everything about that time period is going to be different, right? The expectations around how your body adapts, the expectations around frequency, training load, is going to be different than when you're actively preparing for to run a marathon. And so it only stands to reason that we should think differently about how we define progress, right? And I think it's also important to define progress in context with what's going on externally to your athletic identity. What I mean by that is if you have a really busy time at work, right? So let's say for the next 12 weeks, you got a huge project at work that you're responsible for, expectations are high, or really busy season if there's seasonality to your work, and you're going to be super busy, that you're going to have to kind of push things to stretch the days. The mornings will be earlier, the evenings will be later, so on. if there's opportunity, if there's times like that for you, and I think no matter what your job is, there are probably times where that happens. This can certainly also happen in family life. If there are time periods when you're going to need to be more, do more for your family, maybe that is things like, if you have kids and they're involved in sports and you're responsible for running the carpool or you're coaching your kids team, or things that are going to take more of your time, because it's something that you care about, because it's another area of your life that you're invested in. Again, remember, our athletic identity is not our only identity. There are other things that define us. There are other ways that we work to show up in our lives. It's not just athletically. So when those things happen, I think we all have some version of that, whether it's career-oriented, family-oriented, so on. We need to think about progress in that season as well, right? If that's a busy time, if they're going to be more of a pull on your time, then what does progress look like during that time period? So often we just continue to push forward without taking that context into consideration, right? And then when when we're not able to execute in a way that's in alignment with the expectations that we defined before that season began, we get frustrated, or we get disheartened, we lose motivation, we lose discipline, and again, that sustainability piece falls away. So really, I think working to make sure that we're always critical of or conscious of what's going on in the rest of our lives and where we at in proximity to our goals, right? Progress is not always going to look the same, and progress is not linear, right? Knowing that sometimes we have to pull back to go forward, and that long-term outlook, knowing that, okay, yeah, this is a really busy season for me, and maybe I'm actually, maybe I'm going to lose fitness, right? Maybe I'm not actually going to continue to build fitness or provide. I won't have the time to provide enough training stress to my body to adapt in a way that moves me forward from a fitness perspective. But my argument is that if we pull back, if we make those adjustments, that the mental, emotional recovery is just as important as the physiological adaptation. That we need that time. And if we can come out of that season refreshed, that's actually going to do us more good in the long term versus just pushing forward, pretending like that time period is not happening. And either one of two things is going to happen. We run ourselves into the ground and we overtrain, or we get burnt out, or we are not able to maintain the schedule and the consistency. We get frustrated, and we lose sight of our goals. Right? We quit. We can't stay consistent. We can't stay committed. And so both of those things are not ideal. So actually pull back to go forward, I think. And of course, the same thing can happen in the opposite direction, right? When we have more time, if we're in a season that we're able to be more engaged, maybe we ramp it up, right? So we don't undervalue our ability to show up. We don't shortchange ourselves. So it can happen in both directions. It doesn't have to be, where we pull back, but I see typically that's where it manifests itself the most. So to find progress during these specific seasons, just take a step back, right? If you're feeling like it's really busy and you can't stay committed, or things you're kind of, falling away from the structure and the plan, the consistency that you want, what does progress look like during that time period? I think and we always want to check in with that, right? So maybe it's every season, every quarter, you can set cues for yourself to just check in, what's ahead, and do I need to make any adjustments? What's coming up? What are the expectations from others around me? What are the expectations I put on myself? What are my other responsibilities? If they're unchanged, great. continue with what you're doing. Hopefully, again, you're using some of these tools we talked about before to make sure you're valuing that time and structuring your day in a way that allows you to show up fully and completely. And if that's the case, stay at it. If the answer is different, or if your circumstances have changed, adjust your definition of progress so that you can set yourself up for success. Another area that we can work on progress is to move daily. So, we talk a lot about rest and recovery as athletes, and certainly recovery is paramount. It is, as many of us know, it is when fitness is created, right? So we actually don't build fitness during workouts. We build it when we're resting. So proper recovery is key. With recovery, so we're talking about rest days, we're talking about time to rest. We're also talking about sleep. We're talking about nutrition, meal timing. So the list goes on and on. Recovery is all encompassing. It's everything we're doing when we're not moving, when we're not exercising. However, with that being said, unless you're firing on all cylinders and you're an individual who is able to nail down that exact training structure, these 5 days a week of specific sessions, strength training, one rest day a week, whatever that schedule looks like, unless you're that person, then I think daily movement can be a really valuable tool for people that are struggling to take a progress-oriented mindset, right? Or people that are struggling to maintain consistency or think long-term or put sustainability first. And, the reason that I think we should consider daily movement is that I believe those small bouts of consistency really help us move in a direction that supports our long-term goals. Right? So there's a couple of things. One, that daily consistency helps to build neural pathways that support a mindset where that movement is prioritized, right? Meaning that if we have that consistent touch point every day, we begin to it actually begins to become habitual, right? It's something that we look forward to. It's something that allows us to refocus and recenter. It allows us to show up more focused. There's tons and tons of science that reports, small things like short walks outside every day have tremendous overarching and overreaching health benefits, both physically and mentally, emotionally. So if you're not an athlete, if you're not an individual that is, maxed out, it's really pushing yourself from a physical perspective, and those full down days are critical. At certain levels, rest days where we don't do anything or do as little as possible are very important. But if you, again, are struggling to maintain consistency or think about things sustainably, or, of course, this perfection mindset is getting in your way and you're having trouble thinking about progress over the long term, work to move consistently every day. It sets you up for success. Again, it cues your body, it cues your mind to prioritize that time. And, I think about it, very simply, the adage, an object at rest wants to stay at rest. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. So if we stay in motion, then it becomes easier and easier to continue that forward motion, to continue that consistency. When we are at rest, it's harder to jumpstart things. It's harder to prioritize that time or to pull away from what we're doing, to shift our focus. So I think one way that we can start to think about progress is, did I move today? Right? And again, it could be anything. It could certainly be something like a structured workout. But I think more basically, it could be very simple things like, again, a walk It can be stretching, mobility, very small movements, very small blocks of time that keep that consistency at the forefront. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to take a step back and say, okay, well, maybe 6 structured workouts a week, or 5 or 4, whatever the number is, that doesn't feel sustainable, or I'm not able to nail that down consistently. But what I can do is, these X number of workouts or sessions. Again, we talked about, adjusting that frequency if needed. I can do a certain number of these that support my goals, and move me in a direction from a fitness perspective that I want. But on these other days, I can do these small bouts of movement, right? I can readjust my expectations. And I think that's a really productive way, and a really healthy way to think about how we move through our days, is that we put that consistency, that movement at the forefront, even if it doesn't look and feel like what we thought it might. So work to move daily if you're someone who is working to nail down that consistency. And what I want to challenge you to do is, I know most of us we're not sitting on the couch all day. So we are moving around, right? You walk certain places, you're moving around work, so I realize we're not stagnant. When I say move daily, what I want to challenge you to do is set aside time for a dedicated movement. Just to say, okay, this is the time for this next 15 minutes. I'm actually going to focus on me, right? And again, insert whatever specific movement you want. What's important is that it is a dedicated block of time where you are specifically focused on that movement, that exercise, whatever it is. So that it's really a 2-part. We want to move daily, but we want that movement to be we want to be conscious of it. We want it to be a dedicated period of time where we come back to ourselves and we check in. That's what's going to create those systems, those pathways that build on one another, that set us up for success. And again, look at that long-term progress-oriented mindset. Lastly, we can look at progress, or we can move towards progress versus perfection by setting yourself up for success. So what do I mean by that? Specifically, what I'm talking about is to remove as many barriers as possible from what it takes to reach your goals. One of the things that gets in people's way is access, right? It is, okay, I am, my alarm goes off, I want to get a workout in. Where do I do that? Okay, if I have to drive to the gym, there's friction there, right? That could be fine. Many people have to drive to a facility to exercise, but are there ways to remove friction or limit friction? Right, alarm goes off. I have to drive to the gym. I have to pack my bag. I have to get in the car, or get on my bike, or however you get there. And that, when you're laying in bed, it takes a lot of work, right? Another example, I'm at my office. I've carved out time for myself. I see that time on my calendar. I've talked about how to set yourself up for success in previous podcast episodes, as far as scheduling that time, really carving out that time and giving it as much weight as the other things that you have to do in the day. So you're at your office, that happens, you get a notification, time to exercise, time to move, then what, right? Again, how much friction is in the way between where you're at right now and your ability to prioritize yourself? So I always try to think about ways to break down, hopefully eliminate friction. Um, it can be small things, right? So if you're in your office, is there a yoga mat, on the floor in the corner that you can roll out, that you can stretch and move? Is there a pull-up bar where you can, do a few pull-ups or leg raises or things to move your body? Is there a comfortable space where you can do push-ups or sit-ups or stretch? Or is there a foam roller? Or any of these things? Equipment is often a big part of it. I'm sure you guys have heard, if it comes to getting in a workout like a run or a bike ride, set yourself up the night before, right? If you gotta go for a run, put your shoes out, lay your clothes out, fill your water bottles the night before, have your breakfast ready, right? Eliminate or reduce friction so that you can move into that opportunity as quickly as possible with as little friction as possible. If you had to go to the gym in the morning, pack your bag, have it in your car, whatever it is. And I think it's the same thing. So many people now are working from home. How do we make that a productive space, right? So if you have a home office, what's in your office? Do you have equipment there? Are there things that you can rely on that make that transition to that time that you've set aside for yourself as easy as possible? Even things like some sort of home gym, right? Can you get your hands on some basic equipment? Can you put that in a dedicated space in your home so that you can, it makes it easier, right? If you have 30 minutes to exercise and you have to spend 15 minutes of that collecting equipment, getting your clothes on, whatever it is, the likelihood of success there is diminished pretty quickly. So do your best to set yourself up for success. Again, I think one of the big ways to do that is to schedule that time. I think it starts with carving out that time. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're in a reactive state, it becomes very hard to set yourself up for success, right? If you're scrambling around throughout the day, hoping that a moment arrives when you can prioritize that time and yourself and your goals, that's a very tough position to operate from, right? And I think a lot of us move through our days in that place, in that headspace, where we're just constantly looking for a moment that we can insert our goals, insert that time for ourselves, self-care. Really want to encourage you to be proactive in that place. And I think scheduling that time is really, can be a really good place to start. I know that can sound, or when I mention that often, it sounds a little, sounds like a lot to people, right? It can sound maybe a little militant, where it's like, everything has to be structured throughout the day. I'm not saying that every moment of your life needs to be structured, but I do think that there's a tremendous opportunity, again, to take back some of that control that we give when we are reactive, right? When we're responding constantly throughout the day, running around from task to task. As much as you have the ability to, try to take control of some of that time. And I think at some level, depending on what works for you, scheduling that time and really making a dedicated effort to set aside that time and treating it with as much weight, as much respect, as much urgency as you treat some of these other things, is a really good place to start, because that's going to allow you to put yourself first. And again, when you do that, you're going to see progress, right? Consistency has to come first. And with consistency, then we'll see progress. So just a quick recap, some of the areas that you can work towards or work to implement that are going to help you see progress or take a progress-oriented mindset over perfection. Again, the goal is that we relieve some of that stress, right? We relieve some of the constructs, some of the expectations that we put on how this thing is going to unfold, how being an athlete is going to look and feel. And it's not that we don't have goals, and it's not that we don't have to actually do specific things at certain times, but we can find a balance where we are not looking for perfection, and progress becomes our fuel, right? Progress becomes the thing that keeps us excited because we see it build over time. So one of the ways is to work to build habits. Again, structure makes it easier to prioritize your time. Wherever you can do that, work to build in habits throughout the day. Second one is let go of specifics. So 3 areas we can let go of specifics are to back off on specific activities during the day. Maybe we had an interval session planned, it didn't work out. What can we do now, right? What does it look like to show up, but relinquish some of those expectations? Frequency, another area to let go of specifics. Maybe we had thought we could do 5 sessions a week. That's not working out for us. Now what does it look like? Is it 2? Is it 3? Right? Progress is still worth it. It's still worth it to show up, even if it looks and feels different. Another area we can let go of specifics is the timing, right? When we do our workouts, when we set aside that time each day. If you want to be a morning person and you want to work out in the morning, keep trying to do that. But if it doesn't feel like it's working, how can we shift that time? And it could be any time of the day. It doesn't have to be a morning person, evening, during the day, whatever that is. Let go of the specifics around when you think that you should be able to execute that consistent movement. Third area, define progress during specific seasons and in context with your life. What does it look like to make progress right now based on what's happening in my life and where I'm at in proximity to my goals? Always check yourself against that, right? Progress is going to look different at different times of the year. It should. Your focus changes. Life changes. Different things are happening. Adjust your idea and your expectations around progress based on where you're at and what's going on in your life. The fourth one, try to move daily, right? So unless you're maxed out, unless you're really, really pushing yourself, and that dedicated rest and a full day away from movement is critical, I think it could be really good to move consistently. Again, it doesn't have to be full-on training sessions, doesn't have to be workouts, walks, stretching, light strength training, calisthenics, any of these things, just to keep that consistent touch point. And again, that's going to start to build some of these habits we talked about. It's going to start to build some of these consistent progress-oriented mindset tools that are going to help you build over time. Lastly, set yourself up for success. So reduce friction as much as you can, right? And one of the things that gets in our way of progress is the stuff that's going on externally, the things that get in our way when we go to exercise, right? It's work, it's access, it's equipment, it's time, it's obligations external to our own goals. Whatever that is, think about how you can reduce that friction. As simple as having equipment close to you, right? Having a yoga mat in your office, having a space where you can move comfortably and engage in that exercise. Whatever it is, set yourself up for success. Don't just hope that it happens, right? I talk to athletes all the time that keep running into the same friction, keep running into the same roadblocks, but don't work to actually change the things that are getting in their way. They just hope that it's going to happen. They hope that they'll get better next week. No, be proactive, right? Work to make it better. Success is not a passive process. It's something that is that's very active and takes a consistent, conscious effort to arrive at. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, progress first, not perfection. Work to dial it in when you can. When you can't, progress first, right? That's what takes us where we want to go over time. Progress is what matters. Perfection is something that is hard to obtain. So if you found this information helpful, if you found it engaging, if you enjoy what myself and our guests and our team are talking about at Endurance Minded, please share this episode with a friend, share your favorite episode with a friend, whether that's on social media, whether you send it to them in an email. Let's help get the word out. This is something, this content, these topics, these ideas are something that I am extremely passionate about. And I believe that through the lens of movement, through the lens of being an athlete, we have the ability to really change how we move through our days, how we find how we define success, how we arrive at happiness and joy. And so help me spread the word. Get the word out. Please send this to a friend. That's my ask of you guys. If you've yet to do that and you made it to this point in the podcast, send this episode or your favorite episode to a friend. It would mean a lot to me. As always, you can rate, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That's the lifeblood of podcasts. If you've yet to do that, click the stars button, give us a rating. Hopefully it's a good one. Feedback is always appreciated. And rate and then subscribe. We release these podcasts every other Tuesday at noon. And so you can be alerted when a fresh episode comes out. You can keep up with what's going on. And lastly, enduranceminded.com. So much of the content and conversations that I bring to the show are based on feedback, questions from our audience. So go to enduranceminded.com, scroll to the bottom, let us know what you think. What's on your mind? What are you struggling with? Where's your wins? Right? We talk a lot about the challenges, but I love to talk about and think about where are we winning, right? Where have we found success? What feels right? So either way, let us know, enduranceminded.com. And as always, I can't thank you enough for the support, and I'll see you next time.